photograph speech. We're all here on page 3. Let's go through this, and we're going to read through it paragraph by paragraph. As always, if there are any outstanding questions that you may have regarding what is written here, please ask me. But also note that we are going to go over in detail exactly how to do this speech and what is required, how to develop it, the organization, etc. Let's go and get started here. The photo speech is a speech in which you will bring in a photograph of your choice and share its significance with the audience. In that first sentence, do you think you know what this speech is about?
No.
Okay. What is going to be your job?
To figure out what's important to us.
Yeah, sure. Figure out what's important to you. What do you think you're going to need to share with the audience?
Your thoughts.
It says it right there in the sentence. Feel free to just repeat it.
A photo.
Share the photo.
Significant.
There we go, kid. All right, here we go, people. So we read this one time. Again, your photo speech is where you will bring in a photo, but your job is going to be to communicate its significance to us. That is going to be the purpose of this speech. That is going to be your job. It is the reason you open your mouth, is to communicate said significance. Start thinking about that. Let's go into the next paragraph, and hopefully this will open up some ideas a bit for you. The photograph, as it says here, doesn't have to be a true photograph, something that we're used to, a little 4x6 photograph. But instead, it should be some type of visual representation. You can bring in a poster, a work of art that you have created. Maybe there is a photograph that you love. Maybe there is a painting that hangs on your parents' wall in their house that has been passed down from generation to generation. Maybe there is a piece of jewelry that is significant to you in some way. Like we talked about before, there are many ways that we can have types of visual representation, and I want you to feel free to bring in anything that you want to. The key is, though, is that it should be important to you, and that is what you are going to be communicating to us. The photograph, and I use it in quotes now, that you choose must be large enough for the entire audience to see. What does that mean? Well, if we bring in a photograph, it is very easy to put a photograph underneath the document camera. You can also pull up any types of photographs from the internet if you would like to, or perchance bring them in on a flash drive and download them to the desktop of the computer. Let's say I have an amazing work of art at my family house, and I don't want to bring it in, or it's the size of an entire wall and it's impossible to bring in. Well, all you crazy cats, maybe you take a picture of that and then bring it in on something that you can reflect and put up in front of the audience. If you have maybe a t-shirt at home, but you don't want to bring in the t-shirt, you don't know how it will fit underneath there, but you want the logo or whatever the mantra is that it says, bring that in. You have a little comic strip that's set on your refrigerator for your whole life because it inspired you. Bring in that comic strip. Anything goes in this case. And the important thing is that you are making the visual representation large enough for all of us, and there's many ways that you can do that. If you literally have an artifact or some type of jewelry that is significant to you, you can put it underneath the visual document camera if you would like to, or you could, again, take a photograph and bring that in. As a reminder, the only thing that we don't put up there are things like cell phones or tablets because the reflection gets awkward and grainy and the screen dies and then it pulls it up and you have to put your passcode and the whole thing, right? So we want to avoid that. As it says here, please practice with your photo in advance to ensure it meets all the visual aid requirements for speaking. That visual aid handout, if you weren't here last time, 1, I have extras. 2, it's listed under visual aids in your e-companion on the side. There's a unit there. You can always grab that handout. Additionally, underneath there is a link that tells you how to work the technology. Just remember 5 minutes, we made it last time together. You were all part of it. So you can make sure to watch that just to be clear on how everything works. Any questions thus far? Just about like things to bring in. We're going to go over the content and really how to develop this, but any questions on what I just said?
Do you prefer for it to not be an actual photo?
Oh, I don't prefer anything.
Okay.
I have no feelings about whatever it is. I have feelings. I do have feelings. Okay, so I think that most of you know. I have feelings about it being whatever you want it to be. That's how I get excited. So if it's a photo, if it's not, if it's a painting, if it's a drawing, if it's sometimes like a bracelet or a piece of string. I mean, anything can be a visual representation that, for some reason, communicates meaning to you, and that's what you're going to come and share with us. So whatever you would like to bring in, you can. Any other questions? That was a great one. All right, let's continue on. We're now at paragraph 4, and this is key. This is the one thing that I really want you all to remember when we leave this room today. Do you know what that is called when people say things like that? In public speaking, we call it a wake-up call. Because all of you were like, I'll read this later, I'll watch the video at home later when I'm waking up. But when people say that, like, this is going to be on the exam, or this is the most important thing you're going to hear today, those are what wake-up calls are, so that you can get your audience back in. Because did you see how all of you were like, oh, okay, please. Note that you can always use that trick or that tactic when you're giving your own speeches. This is, however, the most important part, and I'm not saying it just for the fun of it. Let's talk about the central idea of your speech. Remember that a thesis in this class is different from that of English, right? Do we all remember that? Can you on the other side see what I'm doing? Make sure that you can see over there. So, your thesis is a combination of your central idea and everybody, what else? Put an M there, maybe that'll help you out. There we go, main points. Okay, don't make me give you a test. And your main points. Remember, the central idea is what your speech is about, and the main points are how you talk about what your speech is about. In this case, your central idea of this speech is for you to tell us what this photograph signifies to you. So what does it mean when something signifies?
Relates.
Okay, it relates directly. We obviously all know what it is.
No, to the person who's speaking.
Excellent. So it relates to them. For them, it signifies
A meaning or something.
a meaning or something. Excellent. Any type of symbol, if you will, something that represents something else. We can look at this in the same idea of signification. It's a basic idea in communication studies because ideally we want to communicate shared meaning with our audience, but not everybody has the same reference point of what something means. For example, if I took all of us today out to a museum and I said, everybody look at this one piece of art. This one here, it's beautiful. Everybody look at this one piece of art. Then we all came back to the classroom and I asked you to write down what that photograph signifies. Would everybody have the same answer? No. Why not? Why are you shaking your head no? Either of you. Yes?
Because we all have our different perception of something.
Absolutely. We all have our different perceptions of something. Now, in society, oftentimes particular objects can signify a shared meaning or a shared understanding because culturally we have shared meaning in order to communicate. For example, if somebody asks me how old I am and I hold up the number, or I hold up my fingers, how old do you think I am? 2. Kids do this all the time, right? Right? I can't wait for them to do that. Okay, so they hold up their hands. But if I was taking a photograph and I was standing maybe in front of the United Nations after giving an amazing speech and I did this, what would you think this symbolized?
Peace.
How old I was? No. So it signifies different things depending upon the individual who is viewing it, maybe the context of which it is in, and all of our own past or previous experiences. The easiest way to look at this is something like we did this in my other class. So let's say I have a purse. purse's function is to do what? What?
Whole things.
Hold things. Absolutely. That's its function. But we start to do different things to a simple object in order to create meaning about it. So if I instead put little LVs all over this bag, now what does this bag communicate to you? You know, for Louis Vuitton. Clearly, it's so obvious. Again, my drawings are amazing. So are my brands and label making. What does this communicate to you?
Money.
Money, luxury.
It's made by Louis Vuitton.
It's made by Louis Vuitton. Style. Quality. I heard one person say high maintenance one time. This communicates many different things to different people, but we can start to attach meaning to any type of object. The same thing is going to go around for you. Each of you are going to have different visual representations all around you. Oftentimes within our, within our own homes or within our, our cars or whatever, our collections, who even knows? But these visual representations can elicit some kind of response from us. And each of us may be able to look at these artifacts or photographs, and for us, it signifies something very specific, whether it be wealth or luxury or, high maintenance. All of these, we elicit something different from it. Your job is going to be to communicate what this image signifies to you. Why do I say this is the most important part? Well, people will come into this speech and say, today I'm going to tell you why, and I'll hold it. Hi. People will come into this speech and say, I'm going to tell you why this is significant to me by describing the color and the picture. Whatever. That is not your job. I know it's significant to you. That's why you brought it in. Your job is to tell us what it signifies. There you go. And that's the key. So as it says here on paragraph 4, the central idea of this speech is for you to tell us what the photograph signifies when you look at it. Is it love? Is it friendship? Is it patriotism? Happiness? Freedom? Anger? Injustice? Despair? Frustration? Joy? Jubilation? Guilt? Fear? There are 1,000,001 different ideas, emotions, concepts that this photograph or image or artifact can signify to you. It's your job to come up with it. Yeah?
Would that be the thesis?
I'll create that for you in a second. That would at least be the what? There you go. Because the thesis is a combination of your and there you go. So all we've done thus far is come up with the central idea. We need to come up with those main points too. Good question, good question. So if you see down below, a sample thesis could look something like this. I wrote it up for you. I'm crazy. Okay. For you to understand how this photograph signifies blank, if you want to put in that blank, you can put I will describe to you blank, blank, and blank. It's the exact same format as your last speech, right? For you to get to know me better, I'll tell you about my job and my family and what I like to do on weekends. For you to understand how this signifies love, I'll tell you about who was in it, where we were, and what we were doing. Okay, you can take that exact thesis, copy, paste, put in your own ideas, no pressure. You can also take this, change the wording around so that it makes sense the way that you would say it, because not all of us speak the same, right? So you can mix and match that if you'd like to. Last paragraph says, if you do not have your photo on the day you are assigned to speak, you will still be required to speak. What do you mean, Amanda? I mean, if your visual aid isn't working or if something isn't happening, you are still going to need to speak because that was the designated time and we don't have time to fill in. So make sure that your visual aid is working or you'll have a backup in advance. Any questions about this and what the idea is and how it can be a visual representation in any way, shape, or form, and how it should be large enough for the audience to see and how you need to figure out what this signifies to you? Are those concepts clear? No, not yet. Okay, which part are we gone on?
I'm sorry.
Which part are we lost on?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, great, yes. Okay, anybody not good? By a show of hands, is everybody okay?
Yes, but can you give me an example? Give us an example of like a good one. Like, because you said love, friendship, patience, and happiness.
Yeah.
So like any of those.
Anything. Because for you, it may mean poop. And if you can just, and this signifies poop. And I'm going to tell you how it does by describing blank and blank. You get to come up with anything in the whole entire universe that you want to. As long as you can justify it,
Okay.
you've done your job.
And it doesn't have to be happy. It could be
Oh, no, absolutely not.
depressing. Okay.
And I'm not, well, right, there's a couple key ideas here. So remember that even the most experienced of individuals, I don't know how it works. You think that it would just, well, let's see if it goes on. Some of the most important speeches on change, or that make a difference, or that bring about justice, are not easy topics about happiness and love, but instead speeches about despair and hate and injustice and the problems that exist within a world. So it's important to bring those up. The other thing is, a lot of us have emotional, sad stories that are important to share. It brings, unity together. It shows that we share in a common human experience. Also, if it's an important thing for you to talk about and work through, feel free to do so. The only thing that I always remind us of is to remember our emotional fragility, if you will, when in front of an audience. That although we may be 100% A-okay with an experience that happened to us years and years ago, I've worked through it, I've been in therapy, I've talked through it, I wrote a novel on it. The second that you still come up and give a speech, you are so raw up here and exposed, which we know. And so oftentimes, individuals, although they think they're okay, won't be by the time they get up here. And there will be a huge emotional response to whatever they're experiencing. To cry in front of an audience is fine. And if you've ever experienced a speech before where somebody has teared up or has fought the urge to cry, you know that that even brings about more, oftentimes, emotional appeal. It shows a real connection to them. It's a great thing to be vulnerable and feel comfortable to be vulnerable to an audience. But socially and in our society, we've been trained so often to hide emotion. And that's whether you're male or female. And thus, we end up doing, so if you're male, you've been taught never to cry because that's not what men do. And if you're a woman, if you start to cry, you've been told to apologize for it. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cry, I'm so sorry, right? So the important thing is to not allow yourself to apologize or hold back to the audience in any way if that does come up. So if you're saying, can it be depressing, can it be sad? Yes. Make sure that you're ready for whatever happens. Don't apologize for any of the part that could be emotional and offensive. Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, good. Any other questions about this part before we begin the format of the speech? Let's then, if you want to, you can open back up. You can open back up to your syllabus on page 11. It is going to show you the format that we utilize in the introduction speech. The same format we are going to be using in this photograph speech. And guess what? In the informative speech, and then again in the old persuasive speech, and then again in your impromptu speech. Excellent question. Because it's a 2 to 3 minute speech, I'll remind you of timing and balance. A 2 to 3 minute speech. If you are designating 30 seconds for your introduction, and then how long is your conclusion? 22, 30 seconds. That gives us about 2 minutes to spend inside of the body of this speech. that means that the maximum amount of main points that you should have for a 2 to 3 minute speech is between 2 to 3 main points, depending upon the amount of time that you want to designate to each of those points. So if you choose that you want to, maybe I'll add a little bit less in each one and have those 3, great. Or if you really want to build out those 2 so that you can give a good holistic idea to what you were speaking about, go with 2. It is up to you. It is not better or worse to have 2 or 3. Again, it's what will work to justify what you were trying to speak about. Everybody get it? I'm going to leave this idea up here for a second, and I'm going to come over here and talk to you a bit about the organization. Every single speech will always start off with an yes, absolutely. So we're going to have our introduction. And your introduction is going to have 3 components to it. The first component is going to be an attention getter. And this attention getting device can be something like a story, fantastic, or anybody, a quote, or a what? A question. All right, if it's a question and I want the audience to answer, it is called a direct question. And in this case, how do I tell my audience I want them to answer? By a show of hands, right? And we say something. And then, if they answer and they raise their hands, what should we do? Acknowledge that. Say, ooh, looks like about 10 of us. Great. If nobody raises their hand, what do you do? Really? Nobody? There we go. Okay, a couple more people. All right. Right? And then if you don't want them to answer, what is this called? A rhetorical question. How do we indicate to our audience that we do not want you to answer? Don't you dare raise your hand. We could say something like, don't respond, but think about this. Take a moment and ponder, rather than answering out loud, the following question, right? We can guide them on what to do so that we keep our space and our time up here in check. So story, quote, question, what else? A fact, sure, or some kind of statistic, that's great. What else? A joke. Remember, if you're a good joke teller, you get in there. I would not say use a picture or a visual aid in this case. Why? Because that's what the speech is about. Then you use a picture to describe a picture. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But any of these will do. The most important thing is that your central idea always relates back. Oh, I gave it away. Yes. Oh, good. Way to just invert it. I was going to say that your attention getter always relates to your central idea. Fantastic. So this should be relating to this. Oh. I thought it was a bug. Oh, chills everywhere. Wow, that was fast. So glad I didn't throw out my neck or anything. It's very unlike me. All right. And again, what is the central idea? It is what your object or photo signifies. And that's what the central idea is. So make sure that you're going and relating that so that it becomes clear while you were talking about it when you were saying it. The next thing that does everybody understand the attention? Yes. Awesome. Let's go into the next part, which is going to be our reveal. Topic portion. Now, in our case, the last time you revealed your topic, it was your introduction speech. And since that speech was about you said what? Like your name, and you introduced a little bit about you. And then what else is the purpose of the reveal topic portion? Not just to reveal the topic, you, or your name, but instead to also give us any type of yes, good. So its also job is to give us any type of background information that we may not get in the body of this speech, but we need to know in advance. In this case, the topic of this speech is essentially the central idea. But you wouldn't come out and say, the topic of my speech is fear. No. This is in turn where you're going to reveal your photograph or your object or your artifact. This is where you're going to reveal what this topic is. And so, all of us should not put up our visual aid until after we have given our attention getter. Does that make sense to everybody? And why is that?
Want to reveal it after the attention getter?
Yeah, why do we want to reveal the photo after the attention getter?
So your audience is not distracted.
Okay, they aren't distracted. We haven't introduced it yet. What's the risk that we run with showing you the photo and then giving the attention getter? Okay, 1, we could confuse the audience. 2, they could see what our speech is going to be about, and then what? You ruin the surprise. By putting the photograph up before you give the attention getter, it's much like telling the punchline before you give the joke. Remember when I gave that first lecture and I talked to you about snails? Hey everybody, today I'm going to talk about snails. And nobody was very excited about snails, right? Usually we need that attention getter to get our audience so stinking excited about our speech that by the time we get around to revealing the photo, they're like, yay! I can't wait to hear about it. So give the attention getter first and then we'll reveal our topic. Like I said, the idea of background information is going to be here as well. The key here is going to be making this seamless. We talked before about revealing visual aids and how if they aren't done in an appropriate way, it can create things like downtime and awkward fidgeting. It can create a divide between the momentum that we've created and then when we reveal. So if you are going to be telling us any type of background information about the photograph or the object or the artifact that you're bringing in, a good time to do that would be on the way to revealing the visual aid, i.e. when you walk over there and you get it set up. So for example, my photograph that I have like 6 different ones today, so I can start to develop a speech as we go along. But let me go back to this idea of background, and then I'll do an example for you. With background information, think about it in this way. If you went to a friend's house and you walked in and you looked at their mantle, and they had a photograph of maybe all of their family in funny costumes, what would be some of the questions that you asked about that photograph?
Who was this taken at?
Where was this taken? Why are you wearing costumes? Who's in the picture? When was this? You look so young, right? These are the questions we ask all the time. I mean, see, if there was a random rock sitting in the middle of the house, like underneath a light, like, oh, you'd be like, why do you have a rock here? What's that about? Why is that important? Why is it being highlighted, right? These are the questions that we would ask. If you're not going to talk about in the body of the speech, that would be something great to bring about at the beginning. Much like that, if you have a work of art or something that you're going to be showing of a famous artist, you can talk about, like, this was created in the year blah, blah. It's part of the whatnot period. This is an individual who's an artist, and his name was blank, and he did the A, B, and C, if we don't know any of that information. So just remember that kind of detail. If we don't express those things, then we're not going to get around to talking about any of it. Then our audience may be sitting there looking at our visual aid the whole time, being like, why are they wearing that costume? Why is that there? Why are they at the beach? Etc. Does that make sense to everybody? Great. So if I gave, let's put this back down, the pesky bug of fear. If I said something to the extent of, and I encourage all of us to, again, use the space. Do you mind turning that video over here accordingly? Like, really get yourself set up for easy walking and success. But But remember that this should be out of our line of sight, or we should be in our line of sight. It shouldn't be reflecting upon us. So keep the lighting away from projecting on your body. And you're more than welcome to use the space walking back and forth. So if I said something to the, like, I'm quite sure most of us in here have somebody that they consider a hero. Children oftentimes will talk about their favorite heroes, their superheroes, if you will. Iron Man or Spider-Man or maybe Wonder Woman even. Each of us may have a hero that we have in our own life. Maybe it's still those superheroes that you had as a child, or maybe it's somebody that has come to resonate in your life as being much of a hero, just like that of Iron Man. For me personally, I've always had a great hero. And this individual is not a superhero in the traditional sense, but instead is a superhero to me. This individual went through many trials and tribulations. And today I'd like to show you this photograph of her and me at a very young age. This is a photograph of my grandmother, somebody who is a hero to me. My grandmother's name was Tina Rodero, and this photograph was taken on my parents' backyard when I was in the 5th grade. And during this time, I had finally been given the authority to ride our sit-down lawnmower. The reason I chose this photograph is not only because my grandmother is in it, but if you see the strength arm that she is making, that is why I chose this photograph. It was very simple. I was going to ride a lawnmower for the first time. But the person that I chose to ride on that lawnmower with was my grandmother. Because every last thing that she said to me was always encouraging and supportive. And whether I was trying something new in school or perchance trying a new ride on a lawnmower, she reminded me that that was the greatest thing that I could do. She is truly a hero to me. But the most important thing that she always showed me to be that hero is something called courage. And today I'm going to tell you how, for me, this photograph signifies courage. And I'm going to do so by describing the tumultuous journey that it took her to come to the United States. And then I'm going to describe to you the courage that it took her to fight her cancer battle. So, cute. This that I gave you, everybody, did you see how we walked? And so the computer was shut down, I had to re-log in, it was a whole thing, right? But did I waver? And that's the most important thing, making sure that you don't waver in it. But the walking and the talking is an important element to have. And the background information. So you know that I'm not talking about who's in this picture and who I am, but I'm not talking about really where we are, what it looked like, etc. You know that I'm going to talk about two different things. What? Her journey, right, to the United States, and then her battle with cancer. Are either of those things shown in the picture? No. But I am using that to show you how, for me, every time I see that woman like this, it signifies courage. She's truly a hero to me, right? So that's how it went. So I told you the story, I described a little bit about where we were and why it was important to me, and then I told you the thesis statement. Did everybody see how that worked? And does everybody see how they, too, could do something of this stuff? You want me to show you another example? Oh, yes? Okay, great. Aren't they? You could just look at them on my YouTube account, but guess what? Don't have any examples. I'm going to make them all up now. By a show of hands, how many of you have had an experience in your life that you will never forget? If somebody brings up said event, you remember where you were, you can smell the experience around you, you can feel the feelings that go through your body, you are transported back because it was the most amazing and wonderful experience that you've ever had. By a show of hands, who else is with me? All right, right? About half of us in here. I certainly had this experience. I know that this is an event and an exciting experience that I had that literally every time I see, this photo, I am reminded of the most amazing night of my life. This photograph is a photograph that, for me, signifies love. And for all of you to understand how this photograph signifies love, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who's in it, a little bit about where we were, and finally, I'll tell you about what happened that day. So what kind of background information did I give you? Nothing. Why? It's going to go in the body of the speech. Absolutely. So I don't need to give you all that information. Sidebar, I pulled these off the Facebook. I didn't pull up Facebook. Why? Why is it distracting?
People get nosy.
What?
People start getting nosy and see your information on there.
There's all that advertising and nonsense on the side, right? And nobody needs to be distracted by that because you know they'll be like, girl, you were looking at those shoes yesterday. Oh my gosh. You never know what type of thing you're going to pull up on that side. So just make sure that you're down. You can save it. This is saved from Facebook. It's super easy if you want. Then put it on a flash drive and call it a day. Okay. Better? Even more excited? I know. I think so too. I know! It's that exciting. That's how everybody's going to feel about your speech, right? So fun! Okay. Introduction. Any questions about your introduction? Any outstanding things? Everybody thinks they can do their introduction. Let's talk about those crazy things that come in between each main point. What? Those transitions. Fantastic. We must have those between every single main point, and you can see it reflected, of course, on your format there, if you want to. Look back at that. With your transitions, we know that we have to have 3 elements that go in there. There are 3 things that you will have within each transition. Our signpost. And a signpost lets our audience know what's coming up. They're usually phrases or words that indicate a switch of ideas. Things like first, second, third, to begin next, finally, I've spoken about, and next I'm moving forward to. But these are all transitional signposts if you would like. Then the next thing that you need to have is a main, everybody? Point. Yeah, main point. Main point. So, like last time, remember you were like, first I'll tell you about my job so you can get to know me better. First, about my job, point. And then the central idea so you can get to know me better. In this case, so you can understand how it signifies blank. For all of you, as a note, we can do something like, first, I will tell you about main point, blank, right? The main point that you're going to be speaking about. You can even put a 1 there, first. It's like Mad Libs. Play Mad Libs? My other class never played Mad Libs. I'm going to bring in some Mad Libs. I think you'll really enjoy it. Mad Libs are so fun. And it teaches you about verbs, adverbs, adjectives.
That's where you fill in with like words,
Right.
like with you pick a word like a noun or
Right? Isn't it fun?
yeah,
And who would have known that an adverb ends in ly?
and then you read it back.
And then you read it back and you're like, that's a silly story. Mad Libs, they teach you a lot. First, I will tell you about your main point. So you, understand how this photo signifies blank. Another Mad Lib central idea. You'll insert there. You can do this with each of your main points. Again, you don't have to use this exact wording. The important thing is that you have a signpost, a main point, and a central idea for each transition. You can also do that crazy thing called the review preview. I told you a little bit about who's in this photo. Next, I'll tell you about where we were so that you can understand how, for me, this photograph signifies love. So it reminded us of review, and then it previewed what's coming up next. Yeah? All right. Anybody have any questions about a transition? Do you all think that you'll be able to write them? Let's see it by show of hands.
Do we need a review?
No, that's up to you. Do you have a question? I love it. Go.
Is it necessary to say
Well, not for this speech, right? Because that'd be crazy. No, I'm kidding. Is it necessary for you to mention the central idea? Yes. Do you have to say in order for you to understand? No. Say it how you would say it if you were having an everyday conversation. I could say something like, let's start off by looking at who's in the photo so that you can understand how it means friendship in my life. However you want to express it. But yes, we say the central idea again. You're like, isn't that redundant? Well, it is, except that when somebody comes into the classroom or somebody comes into your speaking session that hasn't been there the whole time, it's a good opportunity to recap what they were talking about. Because if you're just sitting there talking about paint colors for 20 minutes, somebody's like, what in the world are paint colors about? Why is this reminding me? Oh, and then the transition is a good opportunity for that reminder. All right, great. Good. Thumbs up. Let's move forward to the body of your speech. We remember, hopefully, from last time, that when we speak, we always speak with a purpose. And that purpose is to communicate our central idea. It's the reason we open our mouth. So for all of us, you will have main points. And remember that your job is to first define or describe the point. Then you'll give us some kind of supporting material that explains that point. And then you're going to connect or relate that support to your central idea. If you recall, the last time, we talked about getting to know you better, and if you said something like, first I'll tell you about my family, you decided to tell us about your mom, and then you told us about her job and what she likes to do. And then we hoped that through her job and what she likes to do, you were able to tell us how that relates to who? You. Because if you didn't, then we dropped the whole purpose of even bringing any of that supporting material up. So what are things up? Supporting materials, these are examples or stories or details or statistics or some kind of testimony. Anything that's going to be useful to help us understand what this main point is about. The key is, of course, always going back to the central idea and telling us how it relates to you. In this case, for example, if I have my first main point of the for example, I had a student one semester, and many of you may have seen this before. they brought in a picture of, has anybody ever heard of the Scream before? Any of you ever seen the movie Scream?
Yeah.
Okay, so very similar. And pretty much where it comes from. You ever seen this picture before? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. One of my students brought this in before, and if you notice this face, what does it look like? The movie? Yeah! Okay, well, it came from somewhere. Okay, the art is called The Scream. The movie is called Scream, etc. So one semester, my student brought this in. And so they could say something as simple as, and this, by the way, is not verbatim, nor is it even, I don't even know if this is what they said. But we could say something like, much conflict, uncomfort, and problems in our society oftentimes come from the idea of the unknown. When people don't know about something, it causes an effect. It can oftentimes cause fear, or fright, or shame, or even take it to the next step and start things like racism, any type of other ism that exists. In this photograph, and I can that was painted by in the year of what? Ism. Who would have guessed? That was created in 1621. I don't know. For me, communicates the idea of the unknown. And I'm going to tell you about how it communicates the idea of the unknown today by describing a couple different things. First, I'll tell you a little bit about the colors that were used. Then I'll tell you about the ominous figure in the front, giving a scream face. And finally, I'll tell you about the two images that are lurking in the background. Let's begin by looking at the color utilized in Van Gogh's photo to understand how this photograph signifies the unknown. So, what this student did then was started to talk about the colors. So they started to talk about those specific descriptions. They talked about the use of blue in the picture. I'm not an artist, so I don't understand. The different colors and hues of blue, how they go from light to darker, how the description in the back becomes dark and almost murky. Why is it dark back there? What is unknown? What is not, right? So that's what they talked about for these different colors. The sky, not showing a blue in its own right, but instead being orange or red. Why is it orange or red? Typically when a sky is orange or red, there's a fire or some kind of hot heat. In this case, is something burning, or is it letting us know that we shouldn't go in there, or that it's bad or wrong, much like a stop sign or any type of other red that tells us to halt and not go forward? Each of these things, for me, leave questions in our head, and the colors, both blue and red, used in different ways, elicit this idea of the unknown. And hopefully you understand how, for me, that's why it signifies. I mean, you can make anything work, really, it's just talking about it, right? You talk about the face, it's like, look at it, is he screaming for happiness, or delight, or anger, or is he fearful of something that's happening? So we just continue to go on, but make sure that we're making those connections back and forth. So if I was to go on to that picture that you want to know so much about, okay. Go back to the one. To begin, I'll tell you a little bit about who's in this photograph so that you can understand how, for me, it signifies love. The individual other than me that is in this photograph is the love of my life, my partner in crime, my best friend, my husband, however you want to hear my many ways that I will describe him. His name is the Chad, and for me, he is every last example and epitome of love. Chad does every last thing for me with exuding love. For example, every decision that he makes in our life is
going to the extent of making sure that life is comfortable and safe for us. And whether this is about working extra hard, or perchance making sure that an environment is clean, or maybe even making sure that he opens the door, or watches out for traffic when I'm coming. Every last thing that he does and every type of behavior that he exhibits is something that is done with absolute love. The words that he says are always have great intention behind them. He speaks with a purpose of making sure that he is kind in what he is saying, that everything he does is done with love, that if he uses some type of criticism, it is done in a way that is helping to build up rather than pull down. And for me, that is why every time I look at this picture in specific and I see his face anywhere, it always reminds me of love. I told you a little bit about who is in it and how for me that signifies love. I'd next like to tell you a little bit about where we were so that you can understand how this photograph signifies love. I had been working a very long day, about 9 hours on a weekend, and Chad said, why don't you come to my parents' house over in the marina? So this photograph was taken over in the marina. He said, my parents aren't going to be there. We'll enjoy at least their view of the ocean and their space and take a night to simply relax. I walked into the house and the entire thing was filled with candles. There was a bag on the couch that was from USC where he had gone that day because that's where we met, and there was a USC sweatshirt in there for me. He had ordered my favorite takeout Chinese. He had my favorite bottle of wine waiting on the dining room table. And finally, he had made a mixtape of all of our favorite love songs together that was playing over the radio. Anybody who would go through this much work in order to make, again, my life comfortable and happy has to be something that is done with simply love. And that's why every time I look at this photo, it reminds me of where we were and how much love was in that room. The last thing, so does this make sense here? All right, so that's how you can go about doing it. Can you see where we are in this picture? Does it look like the inside of somebody's house?
No.
No, exactly. But does it have to be the inside of my parents? No. Instead, it may not even be reflected or shown in the photograph. So again, you just communicate the idea to us in that way. Chad is clearly not going out of his way to make me feel good or do anything like that in this photograph. You can't see that, but that's what your job is, to communicate. You can do this by giving details and description, and then of course relating it back to that central idea. Does that make sense to everybody? Y'all think that you'll be able to do this? All right. Yes?
My question is, how long does the picture have to stay up there?
The whole time.
The whole time?
Mm-hmm. So in this speech, you will keep it up the whole time. Were you staring at the picture when I was talking about all the things that Chad does at that day?
No.
Like at my parents' house, were you staring at the picture? What were you looking at? Why? Because you had to imagine it. What was I doing? What was I using? Why were you not staring at the picture? Because I wasn't staring at the picture. Your audience will take cues from you. First and foremost, I'm not looking at the picture. So if I'm not looking at the picture, you're not going to. Secret option B, I brought that to life. And how did I do so? What? Yeah. How did I talk about it? With a monotone voice?
So excited.
I was so excited. It was so much fun, right? And when you start to hear that, and when you use hand gestures, etc., that's when it comes to life. If I did want to refer to the picture while I was talking about it, then going over and pointing out things I could do and then come back. Because oftentimes we will need to describe that. Maybe there's some writing on an artifact that we can't see, and you may, in your in the reveal topic portion, need to walk over to that to the visual and say, if you can't see down here, it says, never give up, never surrender. What's that from? Oh, it's from Starship. True. Star. But that's the scary one, right? The one with the bugs?
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking of, what's that funny, like, parody that Tim Allen's in? he was like on a Star Trek show. But...
Oh, I got a question.
That's what it's from. Galaxy Quest. Oh, I'm so glad. I feel like we could totally do something. Like, we could win a show. Or a game.
Definitely.
Again, if I know something, I know people. I think this could happen. In communication studies. That is, I got those two things in my pocket. Alright. Let's move forward. I'm going to turn this off. Hi, Chad.
Where's my chat?
Oh, Chad. He's not the fortune teller? That's not the Chad. Alright. Then we need to cruise. Once we've done all of our main points, we cruise into the end, and that's something we call the conclusion. And your conclusion is going to have 3 elements to it. Remember, the first is a signpost. And what would a conclusive signpost be? Something like, finally, in conclusion, to close today, in summary, let's bring it all back together. Anything that lets us know we're ending. Then you'll repeat your thesis. Again, Amanda? Yes, that's right. Repeat it again. To remind us what we spoke about. And then the third thing that you are going to do is refer back to the what? There you go. Refer back to the central idea. The central idea. No, I lied. Why would I say that? I don't know. That's a great idea. But the central, we should refer back to the everyone?
Attention.
There we go, attention getter. I don't know. I was just going with it. Like, yeah, it sounds great. Remember, the answer is usually audience over central idea, so it's we'll refer back to the attention getter. What do we know now at the end of the speech that we didn't know at the beginning of the speech that we can use to resonate? If you used a quote at the beginning, don't necessarily end with the same quote. So to say the quote again, no. But if you talk about the quote at the beginning, what did that mean? And now, how can we resolve that at the end? If I gave you a story about my grandma, so I could say, to conclude today, I told you a little bit about how this photograph to me signifies courage by describing my grandmother's journey to the United States and also her fight with cancer. I hope that the next time you think about the amazing heroes in your life, you don't look to the television or look to the movie screen, but instead look at those around you. Those are the individuals who can always be true heroes of support for all of you. Something like that. Or for those of you who have never had, so, again, to conclude, I told you a little bit about who's in this photo, where we were, and what happened that day, so you can understand how this photograph signifies love. Although many of us in this class did not raise our hand at the beginning, note that all of us, I only hope, can have an experience that one day is so wonderful and memorable that even the image of a photograph can bring back the amazing feelings and emotions that you had so that it can live on forever. That makes sense? When I end this speech, I'm not going to say thank you to my audience. Why don't I say thank you to my audience? Who should be thanking who in this case? What? Yeah, the audience should be thanking you. So we don't say thank you to our audience. How do they know that you're done then if you don't say thank you? Lots of people are like, okay, well that's it. I mean, or have we ever gotten to that point of a conclusion where people are like, how do you know when something ends? How did you know that both of those ideas were over? What happened to my voice? What happened to my body? Okay, maybe I walk, but don't walk off. Like, okay, I'm sitting down. People love to do that too. So in conclusion, I told you about this and I'm done now. I'm out. Done. Don't think I don't have to be anymore. But instead, we can think about how our voice goes down, right? So all of you can go out, hopefully have the adventure of your lifetime. And I can do something simple as nodding my head, putting it down, putting my hand in. Right? Anything that lets us know non-verbally that we have come to an end. I smile, I nod, a bow. Has questions? Yes?
Any tips on how to capture?
It's you, and I really want to make clear that I don't want you to sit around wasting too much time looking for the perfect image. If there is something that you already have out in your house, this may be a good place to start. Or something that you're already using as your Facebook profile photograph, you probably use it for a reason. And hopefully it's not that it signifies that day I had great hair, but hopefully it'll signify something bigger, greater, like this is where I want to, this photograph represents my passion for exploring the world, or something. I'm sorry? Yeah, you could, totally relate it to your introduction speech. This is going to be the last opportunity for you to bring in anything personal. This is your last personalized speech, meaning you can talk about yourself or your family or a friend or anything like that as well. So that's a good thing to remember. But I would look around you and see if there's anything, or if not, like, is there an advertisement or a poster or something that Pinterest is always a fun way to say memes. Memes are fun. Do anything like that. Yeah. Sure. If it signifies something to you, it's like, oh yeah, that's always moved me, that meme. Any other thoughts? Everybody knows what day they're delivering a speech? All right. Most importantly, remember that one of the key things is to practice with your visual aid. Remember to practice the walk and the talk. When you're doing your background information, practice that portion of walking back and forth and moving. If you didn't sign in today,